some Chiefs, guys. Welcome to Mondays with the Chief of the North. Maybe Tuesday, depending on when you're watching it. Who knows? Maybe it's a Sunday. It's hard to say when you're going to watch it. I'm Seth Kaiser, the Chief of the North. Thanks for joining me every week. I try to talk a little bit about the Chiefs early in the week before doing a mailbag a little bit later in the week. During the season, there's obviously, big storylines that come out of every game. There's all sorts of stuff going on. Now we have hit the off-season. Although, is it really that? Is that not really till June? Either way, we've hit the point to where those weekly storylines don't pop up quite as much as they used to. And instead, what we're stuck doing is scouring Twitter for maybe, hey, did DeAndre Hopkins get released yet? Let's find out as we open up Twitter right now. No, not so much. But there's a lot of talk right now about the draft, and that's really what we're all into right now. It's April. Those of you who know me know that I don't pay attention to college football. I have used up all of my wife's grace by following the Chiefs as closely as I do. And so every year, I'll hear a few things during the college football season about this player, that player, et cetera. And maybe I'll watch a few highlights, maybe even a game or two here and there. Probably not. But what ultimately ends up happening is around April, once free agency's kind of cleared out, before I really have a chance to dive deep into other, really in-depth film reviews, I try to learn as much as I can about draft crushes. And so what I've done the last few years, I've done a series called Know Your Draft Crush, where I've taken a look at 2 years ago, I looked at tackles. Then, of course, they traded for Orlando Brown Jr. Then last year, I looked at a bunch of receivers that were looked at as first, second, and third round prospects. There was only one that I didn't. His name was Sky Moore. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. So I got to review his film after the draft. And I had someone say to me that now what they know is, whatever players I don't review, they'll just make sure to look at them because that's who the Chiefs are guaranteed to take. But that's what we're starting on. I'm excited about it. The Know Your Draft Crush series is one of my very favorite times where I get to watch college film. I get a chance to maybe look at guys that would be good fits. So the way I do this is I try to find a couple of position groups that make sense for the Chiefs. Often it's only one because there's only a finite amount of time. This year, I'm looking at wide receivers yet again, as well as defensive linemen with probably an emphasis on edge rushers. And my very first one with edge rushers is going to be tough for me because it's a name that I just will never be able to pronounce. But you know what? That's going to be okay. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But first, I want to talk about the Know Your Draft Crush series because we opened it up. You can find it here at the Chief of the North newsletter. This is Know Your Chiefs Draft Crush Part 1, Wide Receiver Methodology, and Quentin Johnston. And so as you can see, as I put right up here, this one is unlocked for everyone. So if you're reading this, you can actually go check this out right now, or you can, look up here and read about Rule 9 disclosures if you want. But I would instead probably go to the Chief of the North newsletter, mnchiefsfan.substack.com, and you can check out what I think of Quentin Johnston and also how we're going to be breaking down wide receivers. Because here's one thing for me, and if you're watching this, you know this by now. I'm a big believer that the film tells us what we need to know about a player overall. I mean, yeah, some of the stuff that you see in terms of, their testing, their combine stuff, that can be useful to either confirm or show a potential problem with things that you're seeing on film. I'm a big believer in the film tells us everything we need to know. So that's what I'm doing with wide receivers this year. And so the thing I want to talk to you guys about today is two things. We'll talk about Quentin Johnston in a second. But first, I'm going to talk about the methodology and what I'm looking for when I review receivers, because I realize that that's something that is a little bit different for everyone. And so one thing that I wrote about at length here is, so what exactly am I looking for? You want to know the player's height, weight. You want to know the college they attended. Maybe look at some of their numbers, their RAS numbers, their relative athletic score to see kind of how they score. One thing that's kind of interesting with Quentin Johnston is the poor 3 cone, which was a little bit interesting because on film, that's not exactly what shows up, but we'll get into that in a second here. So I look at that, but for me, it's mostly the film. And these are the things that I look for when I'm looking at a wide receiver. Their speed, acceleration, agility. Those are all different things, right? You've got long speed. You've got the ability to accelerate, particularly off the line of scrimmage to try to, get even to get leaving. And agility is that ability to change direction well without losing too much speed. And that's something that really can separate guys in terms of which routes they can run and where they can create separation. Release ability, how they get off the line, that matters a great deal. There's a number of different ways to win at the line. Can they do it? Because at the pros, it's going to matter a great deal more. With their route running, how are their feet? How did they show that they could run a few more complicated routes with more than one move in it? Do they maintain speed throughout breaks? How do they handle sight adjustments? Stuff like that. There's hand strength of catch point. I think pretty much everyone gets this. One thing that I really look at that I don't think gets enough conversation is tracking the ball in the air. How well does a guy track a ball in the air? And I'm not just talking about contested catch situations. I'm talking about when you've got a deep threat. And we'll take Marquez Valdez-Scantling, for example. There are a lot of fast guys in the league. But the ability to continue to run fast while looking over your shoulder for the ball and adjust where you're running without falling over and without losing too much speed, that is a very underrated ability, and you need that to be a consistently good deep threat. Otherwise, you're just a fast guy who needs to be wide open to turn and watch the ball in at the last second. I look at yards after catch and playmaking, how do you take away yards, and then overall takeaway. So the guy I started with Quentin Johnston at TCU, we'll talk about him for just a couple minutes today just because I watch his film and I like him. He's a guy who can do a lot of things well. And he's got, I think he would be, I think he's probably going to be taken in the top 20. Guys, his size and combination of speed and quickness, because he does show pretty decent quickness on film. Those guys are rare, especially, guys that were relatively productive in college. They just get snapped up pretty quickly. And so there were a couple things that I just wanted to talk about with him that I really appreciated. And so what I do with these articles, and again, this is going to be like one long commercial for the Chief of the North newsletter, I guess, is so I just go through each area that I'm looking for and I write about it. What do we see here with these things? And so take this snap, for example. This is Johnston here. It's not a difficult route. He's pretty open. But what I've noticed here is his ability to move a little bit in space, to start a bit after threatening deep. That ability to accelerate off the line quickly, be able to change direction a bit to avoid contact, be able to stop to present a target for the quarterback. Those are things that you want to look for. And the reason I utilize this particular play as an example is that not a lot of people are doubting that Johnston's got good speed or good acceleration, but what separates him from a lot of guys with that kind of maybe a little more long speed and decent acceleration is his ability to change directions decently as well. And so that's something I really like about him. The other thing that I really like about him, well, there's two other things that I really like about him. One is his release ability. And I know some people don't really love these clips playing over and over, but it's what works for me. So it's how I'm going to use it. If you watch him get off the line, there's two things about him that make him good with releases. The first you see right there where he swats away the hands of the defender. He's got good length, he's strong, and he's comfortable attacking the hands of defenders rather than just trying to move away from them to avoid the contact. He's comfortable with swats, he's comfortable pushing off, and he's able to do it while maintaining speed or accelerating. The other thing that you can see there is that he's got a little bit quicker feet than you'd expect with a guy his size, guy with his overall speed, to be able to try to make a few stutter steps at the line, to try to force a defender to keep from committing one way or the other. So the thing that I look for a lot with receivers for the NFL level, route running ideally can be taught, right? And there might be a ceiling there for guys, but it's hard to say. But the ability to get good releases and the ability to run through contact, those things are, it seems often like guys either have it or they don't. And I think Johnston has it. And I think that's something that really, it says something about his ability to probably succeed at the next level. Just to be able to have the requisite quickness to get open, to swat hands away. Those are the things that are going to stand out a little bit in terms of man coverage situations. I talk about Johnston's hands quite a bit because he's a little more of a body catcher and he has concentration drops. Those are the things that I think might make him fall a little lower in the first round. If he had high level hands, he'd probably be fringe top 10 pick type guy. But he is a body catcher, not all the time, but consistently. He's consistently inconsistent with his hands. Now, for some people, that's just a non-starter right there. They won't take a guy. For me, it all depends on the rest of your skill set. Tyreek Hill was a body catcher, still is, and had kind of inconsistent hands. But he had such overwhelming traits everywhere else that you kind of forgive it. Now, Johnston isn't going to have all those same overwhelming traits as Tyreek Hill because there's only one of those guys. But it's just an example to serve as, you have this and you might not have that, or you might have this, but then you don't have this. And it's all about figuring out what it all looks like in sum. But that's really the bigger issue that people had with him in terms of the body catching and just some concentration drops. What I do like, though, in terms of his ball skills is, and this is exactly what I was talking about here. If you watch as he tracks this ball down deep, he understands. He's slow. He's able to locate the ball without slowing down. But then when he sees where it's going, he slows his body. His body. He slows his route. He tracks where the ball is going to land, and he protects it pretty well coming in. He actually made a few more contested catches than I would have expected, considering he doesn't have a good reputation for it. But make no mistake, despite him being a big receiver, he's not a contested catch guy. He is not a go up and get it guy. He's not a fade guy. He is a separation guy, which frankly I think fits better with Andy Reid's offense than the other way around. The other thing I really like about him, and again, you can go read about this. I talk a lot more in depth about it, is that here he is right here coming across the middle of the field. He's a better yards after catch player than most in the draft. His combination of speed and agility, and he's got, for a guy who isn't really a contested catch guy, he doesn't have a problem with contact and shaking it off. He shows a little power when he runs. So he puts secondary defenders in a really bad spot because he's faster than a lot of them, but he's also pretty powerful too. And so no matter whether you go high or you go low, you could run into problems with him. Consistently shakes the first tackler. Those are a lot of things that I like about Quentin Johnston. And like I said, that's kind of some of the framework around which I'm going to be looking at multiple receivers in the draft. I think Johnston's a good fit for what the Chiefs do. He's got the ability to help out with those screens and jet sweeps and that kind of stuff. He's a legitimate deep threat, which is something that I think they need next to MVS. But he also has the ability, or at least the parts, the talent, the framework to be a guy who can win against man coverage with consistency. And that's a big thing that they need. Not a guy who can win contested catches. They need a guy who can create separation. And he looks like he's a guy who could do that. So that's the time that I have for you today. That's Quentin Johnston. That's how we're going to be looking at wide receivers. We're going to be doing this up until the draft. We'll be looking at defensive linemen as well. I'll do the same thing with that one in terms of kind of walk you through my methodology. But I'm excited to look at a lot of the guys in this draft. I think it's not quite as talented a wide receiver draft as last year, I don't think. But there are a few guys that interest me, and Johnston's one of them. After watching his film, I'd be perfectly fine if the Chiefs grabbed him in the first. Even traded up a little bit to grab him, depending on what they gave up as ever. But in the meantime, we got a lot more guys to look at. Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit like, subscribe, and whatever else it is you're supposed to do with YouTube, because I'm not professional enough to know. What I am professional enough to know is that it's a great week to be a Chiefs fan, and I appreciate every one of you.